Welcome to the future of medical training and education with XR and VR webinar from Varjo. I'm Ville Leppälä. I'm your host today. And let's get started with a couple of practicalities. So first off, I'm sure you will have some questions during today's session. We have a great Q&A tool in the Zoom software. So on the bottom bar, you should be able to find a Q&A button. So hit that, type in your question, and then we will have a Q&A session in the end of this webinar. So we will then answer all of the questions. First off, let's have a quick recap on Varjo. So Varjo is a company creating XR and VR devices for professional use cases. So our devices are used in the most demanding use cases, such as training and simulation, design and engineering, and medical and healthcare. In practice, we do have two devices on the market. So the Varjo VR3 and the XR3. From these, the VR3 is a VR device where the user gets fully immersed and sees everything extremely crisp and clear through the unique human eye resolution technology that we have built. In addition, the device also includes eye tracking. Then on the right-hand side, there's the XR3. This utilizes the same human eye resolution technology and eye tracking, but adds in video pass through mixed reality. So basically, there's two cameras in the front streaming in the surrounding world, and makes it possible to blend this seamlessly into virtual interaction. So this as an introduction into Varjo. We're going to have lots of cool examples later on today. So before getting into those, let's introduce our co-host today. So I'm delighted to have three other hosts today from Laerdal Medical and Touch of Life Technologies. So Andre Fangueiro and Emil Kristensen are from Laerdal. And Andre, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Ville. Yes, so my name is Andre Fangueiro, and I'm the design manager in Laerdal Medical in Norway. And here today with me, I have Emil. Emil, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Emil Kristensen, and I'm working out of Laerdal in Copenhagen. And I'm a product owner on a team that deals exclusively with XR technologies at the moment, simulation. Thanks.
As a short introduction to Laerdal and what we do. So Laerdal is a global company that develops products and programs for healthcare providers to help improve in both quality and efficiency. Laerdal was founded in 1940 in Norway and is now represented in over 50 countries. And one of the things that differentiate ourselves is that Laerdal, we have a strong mission. Our mission is to help save 1 million more lives every year by 2030. And as design manager, and also here Emil, as one of the product owners and developers, it's our responsibility to support our teams and our business units in solving our mission quests. To achieve our mission, we focus on 4 categories: delivering models via different channels that include partnerships, very much like this one that we have with Varjo. We also focus on education and healthcare trends to ensure relevant and up-to-date practices. And of course, enabling technologies such as virtual and mixed reality So later today, I'm very excited to present together with Emil a short video of our vision of how the future of simulation could look like.
Thank you, Andre and Emil, for the introduction. And I have to say that is a really impressive mission you have, saving 1 million lives. That's a big impact. Then we have also Greg Spitzer from Touch of Life Technology. So welcome, Greg. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, thank you, Ville. So yeah, as Ville mentioned, I'm Greg Spitzer, Touch of Life Technologies. We're in Denver, Colorado in the US, and we build anatomy education products. So kind of focusing on the education prior to healthcare training that Laerdal works in. So our goal is to improve that education in such a way that students and learners come better prepared into their healthcare professions. And we do that through virtual experiences with real anatomy. And the real anatomy is really the important part there. So that starts out with our company and the Visible Human Project. And that's really where we got founded. So that was a project by the National Library of Medicine in the 90s that was done at the University of Colorado. And that's where our company was founded out of. So these were real anatomical sections taken through a cadaver and then digitized, put on the computer so that we can reconstruct three-dimensional views and get other visualizations. Since then, that data was all at 1 millimeter sections. We've done much higher resolution data sets for other purposes, down to 50 microns. And my hope is in the resolution that we find in the Varjo products, we'll start using that more. The kind of natural extension of that is obviously into gross anatomy education. So that's certainly an area that we cover from the high school to medical school level. But then kind of carrying on from just anatomy into the overall curriculum that is involved in teaching students and teaching healthcare professionals. So taking that anatomy and applying it to lessons within the software and within universities. So for ultrasound education, or talking about a surgical procedure, in this case, radical nephrectomy, and accessing the kidneys and what the anatomy involved is there. And then finally, we've worked towards getting it more involved in those initial stages of clinical training. So here, working with a mannequin and intubation and looking at the anatomy involved there, or a first-year student experiencing ultrasound for the first time and understanding what it is that they're seeing in the patient that they're working on. So that's kind of our overarching effort. Overall, we focus on a platform too, because we don't believe that there's any kind of one modality that serves everything. So you might want to study at your iPad, get together with a group of people and work through a virtual dissection on an interactive table, or now in virtual, augmented, and XR reality devices, which really I think is the future and what we'll be talking about a lot more today. So thanks.
Thanks, Greg, for the introduction. I have to say you have some pretty interesting pictures there, so hope to see some further material soon. Andre, I'd like to get started on a question regarding your work. So I know that you have been building a XR-based simulation training product or a prototype. So from your point of view, how does mixed reality transform medical education?
Yes, very good, Ville. Thank you for the question. So to give you a little bit of background, in Laerdal, we have been focusing in web-based virtual simulation for over a decade. To help users building confidence and competence in decision making. We also have been focusing on team communication by practicing scenarios in a face-to-face with a high fidelity simulator like you can see in this picture here. So one of the questions that we asked ourselves was what would happen if we would merge both the digital and the physical simulation into one offering? And if we would merge both of them, would that generate benefits of, for example, flexible virtual learning and team communication with haptic feedbacks? And would that improve training efficiency and effectiveness? And by this, generate new life-saving opportunities? So with this question in mind, we went out and explored and developed a prototype together with Emil. And there is, Emil will prepare here a new short video, and Emil will talk us through our vision of the future.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. So you'll see a lot of different stuff in the video, but I want you to notice the objects that occur in both the physical world and then the virtual simulation that we have. So this is what we want to do in creating a digital twin of the simulation that we're doing in this virtual space. And of course, every action that you have in a simulation has a corresponding learning objective, and those are different in physical simulation, and they're different in virtual simulation. So in physical, for instance, you would need to have the haptical feedback, you would need to have train your psychomotor skills, validate the skills, and of course here it's the mannequin, and you also see a stethoscope for auscultation, of course. And then in the virtual simulation, like Andre touched upon, we have critical thinking, decision-making skills that we want to train. And as well, we have the benefits of digital training. So we have the flexibility and the accessibility, and we can add animations to the patient, as you see here. We can add pain responses, or we can add medical conditions like rashes or cyanosis. And then once we have the digital twin that I mentioned before, we can actually merge the two modalities, the two simulation modalities, the virtual and the physical. So this is really an opportunity for us to tie our portfolio together, the digital portfolio and the physical mannequins that we have, and to tie the learning objective together into one experience. This is the learning space, we call it. This is where much of the learning also happens. So this is actually the flexibility of the virtual simulation, where we could have following up all the data aggregation that we did in the simulation. We can have assessment, we can have a peer-to-peer debrief and feedback. We could also have an instructor jumping in and debriefing a user or a learner. But we really see this as a way to create clinical, sort of synthetic clinical experience in the long run here. So that's a big step for us. So on to you, Andre. I think you have something about our vision for the future as well, for simulation.
Yes, so our vision for the future is in that aspect very simple, but also, of course, very ambitious. So what we believe is that the future of simulation can enhance the existing portfolio, where teams from across the world can work together in any simulated scenario. Because we are now tracking the users in both the physical and the digital world, we can now create this digital twin that Emil was talking about, and are now able to collect new types of data, which can generate a detailed analysis of all interactions and intervention performed during the session. This new simulation type will be disconnected, of course, from time and place, while connecting participants in a new and flexible way. And we see this as a massive step forward. So in the next slide, I will just show you very quickly what we believe. So we believe that with these new simulation types that are both virtual and mixed reality, we will increase the confidence in our users. Therefore, we'll enhance the learning outcomes. We also believe that it's this new virtual and mixed reality training and simulation will generate higher level of engagements during the session and improve the healthcare education for all. So in these times, of course, that we are now with confinement and COVID-19, new ways of simulation like this can create a better trained user and enhance life-saving opportunities. And by this support, what we mentioned in the beginning, our mission to save 1 million lives more by 2030. And back to you, Ville.
Thanks. thanks for this. Was a pretty interesting, impressive video. I guess it was also the world premiere of that. So great to see it. A quick question. So did you ever try how many participants could you take it into the session?
I had a session yesterday where we had 4 participants at once. So it's of course a bandwidth issue, but it also limits to how many headsets you have around a mannequin. But of course, on the virtual side, it's a lot more, I would say. So
yeah. No, I really like the aspect of combining.
I think we're sort of matching the team dynamics around a mannequin in a normal healthcare training situation.
Yeah. Right. So Andre and Emil mentioned about virtual training and screen-based training, and then the new stuff, mixed reality-based training. Greg, I know you have also a long experience in screen-based education. So how does that compare into VR and XR-based education in anatomy education?
Yeah, so I think one of the big differences is the actual experience, anatomy and depth. And if we want to maybe take a look at a video that we did to go with that, I'll point out at the beginning of the video before getting the question. So this is the anatomy lab at University of Colorado where we actually shot this. So this is wearing an XR3 headset. So the view through the headset of a real anatomy lab. It's not a really well done virtual environment. And then we have virtual content overlaid within that anatomy lab. And so here somebody's going to go through removing the anterior wall of the abdomen, looking at structures underneath, and just otherwise manipulating that anatomy. But kind of getting back to the question as you watch this, is that really much more immersive, much more interactive experience compared to a screen-based environment. And then on top of it, the ability to see depth. So you look at something on a screen and it's flat, which I realize is what you're doing on the webinar right now. But if you had a headset on and we're watching this immersively, you really get that relationships between anatomy and structures and different components. The last thing with the XR that I'd like to point out here too is, we're shooting this right now. This was just recently in a time of COVID, and so we don't have other people in the lab. But obviously, using it in an educational setting, you would have other people in the lab. They could be looking at this environment at the same time. You could also be using it with a mixed, real dissection with a cadaveric specimen and the virtual anatomy maybe sitting behind it or above it, so that you can reference one while working with the other. And that kind of gets back to the tactile experience. The one thing, VR and XR certainly doesn't provide is that tactile interaction that Andre and Emil mentioned. And that's very important. You don't just look at your patients, you touch them unless you're a radiologist. So it's important to have that experience. And so combining those things is really where XR comes into play, I think.
Also a pretty impressive video, I have to say, extremely nice quality. So where have you actually acquired this material?
As far as the video itself?
Or
that was shot in
the anatomy content?
So that was all part of the Visible Human project. So it's a photographic data set of anatomy. So it's not artistic interpretations. It's real sections through a human body. So everything you see is real. And that really, to us, is important because you don't see cartoon patients. You see real patients. So you should understand real anatomy to go behind that.
Right. So really true data with real humans.
Yes. And that's where the resolution is hugely important in that too.
So you both now, you've been talking about VR and XR, but how would you actually compare these technologies then in healthcare simulation? Emil, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I think I think we really see opportunities for both. But of course, I think that VR really maps to the decision making and the critical thinking that we then map to right now to a screen simulation. So we don't get the haptics there, and which is also a big factor when we present this to people, a VR simulation. They say, well, where's my haptic? Where's my mannequin? So the MR really takes it above and beyond, so we can actually merge the two modalities and have the benefits of both. So the haptics that lets you train really psychomotor skills, and then the flexibility of the digital world. So it's there's a difference, of course, but we really see potential in both. Maybe on the long term and the short term. That's why we also see them.
Greg, do you have any thoughts from your perspective on this?
Sure, yeah, and I agree with a lot of those things and kind of uses of both. For us, I think it also goes just into kind of how you study. VR can certainly be fine when you're just studying on your own or working with a virtual data set exclusively, because you really don't need to see the room around you. If you're in an apartment, for example, it doesn't add any value. But if you want to work with a group of other students or use something multimodal, anatomy, for one, we always believe is a very multimodal subject in terms of, the virtual anatomy we provide isn't the only thing that you'll ever use to learn. You have physical models, you have dissections, you have lots of different materials. And, if you had VR, you would have to jump back and forth. So you might put on the headset, go look at some virtual anatomy, then take it off and go touch some real bones and go back and forth. And, all that switching is not a good educational experience. So being able to, do that all at one time and discuss with other people while you're doing it brings great value.
So basically, to sum up, both have their own use cases and benefits, and are complementary but not competing with each other.
Yeah.
So you've been talking about benefits and the value, and I think we might have quite many educators joining this webinar. So Greg, I know you have at least been studying the benefits of VR and XR based learning. So how do these technologies then impact learning?
Yeah, and obviously we'd like to do some broader studies, but we've started with some surveys. And so we started with the Baylor physical therapy program that has a unique program where their students study online, working with the instructor for a couple months, and then they get together for a 1-week intensive dissection course in person. And they just held that recently down in Texas. And so during that time, they're in a dissection lab, but we also introduced VR into that this year and gathered some feedback from the students. And the results overall were very good, and I think show a few different interesting things. So it was just a general survey, overwhelmingly, a very positive experience from everyone. One thing you worry about with a 1-week intensive course is they have limited time, and so if you introduce something that doesn't add value, they're not going to like it. It's a waste of time. And the results we got, I think, very much showed that they found this valuable. They found it added to the experience that they had. So it wasn't, oh, we could do this instead of dissection, or, yeah, this would be nice if we didn't have dissection, but they really worked synergistically. And I think that's hugely important. And, one of the other important things that everybody will say in education is just having fun. And the fact that they enjoyed it means they were involved and excited about what they were learning, and that always helps with retention. One last interesting thing I thought was in some of the other final questions was all these students I mentioned studied anatomy prior to this intensive course where they used the VR in combination with other modalities. And so 80% of those students were using our software on their computer or iPad on a weekly basis prior to the VR experience. And the anatomy isn't any different. So the fact that they still found great value in the virtual experience tells me that that VR platform is what brought that value because the content was the same. So they weren't gaining any new, viewpoints on the anatomy. They were just experiencing it differently, and yet they found great value in it. So I think that really bodes well for the future of the technology overall in education.
These are pretty interesting results, and I really I'm impressed of the fact that people really felt that it was fun. I think, at least thinking of my experience in the university, every time you had fun, you also kind of justified much more time to spend with the studies. Andre or Emil, have you had any experience on this topic?
We see very similar as Greg in that aspect, that we see that it generates generally a great excitement and engagement, especially with the learners. So we definitely see that, and we also see that it increases in confidence throughout the session. So the longer that they are in the session, the more confident that they become, and we definitely feel that this has value. And I think that I just one story comes to mind. Ville, and you have been, of course, involved in this one. That we have received this feedback from one of our partners, that he has been conducting a test where half of the group of the samples of students were using the mixed reality, and the other half was without the mixed reality. And I never forget that his feedback was that the control group that didn't have the mixed reality has demanded to test the mixed reality, what really shows the eagerness and the desirability of this in the context of education. But I don't know if Emil also has something that he has seen.
Yeah, I think that of course we're seeing this engagement because it's so exciting to see, and I think it's really important that we see this with users like your story, Andre. We also see it in facilities and sites, instructors and gatekeepers for this education, because they also see the excitement and the engagement from users, and they also see the benefits of going digital in a lot of the stuff that they're doing. So they both see higher throughput and, of course, money saving, and they see better retention, better students. So I think it resonates with both users and facilities. They're asking for it, at least at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. Really interesting findings. So you've then also mentioned about using mixed reality or having super high resolution data sets. So Greg, how do these features like high res or mixed reality help to engage students then specifically?
Yeah, I think the resolution in particular is what draws us to the Varjo platform and is very valuable. I mentioned earlier some of the 50 micron data sets and being able to see details that you don't see in our current data sets, and you need a platform to allow you to do that. And why it's important is for as you go on in studying, so maybe going into surgery, etc., you're going to work with nerves and vessels and smaller structures, and you have to be able to see those and understand where they are. So that resolution is really important there. And then I think in the XR space, it's obviously important in that when you look at the world around you, you don't want it to feel like you're looking through a TV screen. I was impressed the first time I put on the Varjo headset with XR, and that after a few minutes, I really almost didn't remember that I was wearing a headset in terms of looking at the people in front of me. But at the same time, I could see, our data and our imagery in full resolution and color fidelity, which is, very important to us, is to be able to see that data in good quality, but also not feel like you're stuck in a headset.
Yeah, I can fully agree on the feeling when you put the headset on and see the data set that you created. It's extremely impressive in terms of quality. It's hard to say whether it's real or not. How about then Andre or Emil? Have you had any findings on this side?
Yeah, I think the of course we see the higher resolution that is tied for us. It's tied to greater presence and greater presence means that you sort of buy into the simulation, and that means that you have better retention, and that means you have better learning and better healthcare quality, right? But the real benefit for us, I think, is the mixed reality, because that is the enabler of bringing our two traditional modalities together, the physical and the haptics, and then the digital simulation. So that is really an enabler for us.
So really getting into practicing the muscular feedback and how to do it
get the digital
yourself.
as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, good points. We've now talked quite a bit of solutions that we have today, but now when we go to 20, 21, 22, 23, how do you see the future? So Andre, do you want to get started?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from our perspective. We definitely believe that the future will be digital, right? So that's without a question. Now, when it comes to, of course, VR and mixed reality and simulation in general, we believe that they more likely they will be disconnected from time and place. And therefore, we see value in both of them in two different sections, right? So we need this data insights to both come in and both go out, so we can really record those sessions and understand, what has been done. So definitely, we see that the future for simulation will be digital. Definitely, we believe that with virtual reality and mixed reality, it will open and create more engaging experiences and new ways of interaction that we believe that it will be very, very valuable. And we really see the value of this. And so from our point of view, the future will be digital, and I think VR and mixed reality will play a role on it for sure.
And likewise, I think, I mentioned earlier that I think VR and XR and just those virtual environments are definitely, they're a huge part of the future of anatomy in particular, just because they give you that experience with it that you don't get with screen-based options. So I think in the future, there will be a lot of learning this way. And it does open up a lot of, the rest of the world interacting with people in virtual spaces, different countries. We have a classroom feature in our software where I'll do, remote sessions with people in California that are using our products, and I have a VR headset on at my house, and we're both interacting with the same data sets. And, that just opens up a lot of educational opportunities, opportunities for collaboration, and also just kind of equal training, being able to access experts and knowledge that aren't in your, local city or state or country. And that has huge advantages for everybody.
I think also, from my point of view, I think that in time, I'm really guessing and hoping that this technology is more accessible to everybody. And it also means to me that the gap we have now between learning and practicing can be a lot smaller. So let's say that we can actually enhance the reality through an MR headset, however small it is, however big it is. We can actually bring the learning a lot closer to the actual practice. So you can have just-in-time training and really enhance and learn on the fly instead of having a long distance between learning and practicing. That's also sort of an end goal for this, I think.
So more digital. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
I was just gonna add one other thing I thought about last night in terms of XR and VR and kind of the future is I think in some ways COVID kind of gave us a VR experience and made you realize that we don't want to be stuck in a room or our houses or whatever. We want to interact with other people. And so I think that's where XR in particular, or MR, or however you want to term it, has great value, is because for a while you can study something, you can study in a virtual environment, but ultimately you want to interact with real people too. And we've learned that over the last year, I think more so.
So more digital, more connected, more accessible, and could I say, more humane through mixed reality as well.
Let's do, yeah.
Right, but hey, I see a lot of questions lined up, so I think it's a good time to hop into the Q&A session. So still as a reminder, in case you want to ask further questions, just type in your question in the Q&A tool and we'll be answering them live here. In case we run out of time, we will be answering all the questions, all the remaining questions then after the session through email. So don't worry, just type in the question and you'll get that answer sooner or later. As a format, let's do it so that I'll be reading the questions through and then I'll pass one by one them then to either Emil, Andre, or Greg. So let's get started. First question is from Tran. So I work for VR and AR device and applications. However, the price of the device is still expensive for using. I hope in the future the device and software will be cheap for people to use. Well, yeah, I guess this is more a comment, and I can say it a quick comment on my side. So that's right. The devices have been expensive. Now I'm happy to say that now, especially on Varjo side, as we've moved on to the third device generation, we've been also able to push the pricing a bit down, and we see that as the scene is growing, this also means much more scalable solutions, and I'm sure this development will continue to go forward.
I would add to that too, Ville, from a partner perspective.
Yeah, Greg, go ahead.
Because I think it is important from a partner perspective, and students, dealing with students in educational institutions, they're very price sensitive. But for us, I think, our attraction is the price will come down over time, and in all technology. I mean, my first computer was a lot more expensive than my laptop today and way less powerful. And so the quality and what you can build around it educationally has great value, and it'll only get better in terms of accessibility over time. At least that's kind of our viewpoint on that.
Then we have a question from John. Could you stream what the participants are doing for remote viewing? Emil, would you like to cover this?
Yeah, it's definitely an opportunity. So we actually, in the application that we did, we tried to cover a lot of grounds in the prototype that we did. So I actually only commented on the MR part. We also, of course, had to build up the VR corresponding world. We also made up a streaming solution. So we call it the Observer Cam. So let's say that you want to film whatever is going on in the virtual space. You can actually have a camera in there that is just for an instructor, or it could be streamed for users outside the simulation. So that's definitely an opportunity. But that's again talking back to the benefits of the digital, right?
Thanks. And then John has a follow-up question to Greg. Does the Toltec solution allow us to add own DICOM images?
No, right now it's our data sets that we've created, photographic data sets that are in there. We've worked with a few faculty on bringing their own data sets in that are MRI data sets and visualizing those, but there's no just end user tool for that right now.
Thanks. And then the next question is then related to see-through. So Moritz is asking, the see-through concept is currently trending. What are, from your point of view, the key differences / advantages, such as the integration of haptics, etc.? And how do you see that concept evolving compared to native VR and MR?
Maybe I can take a first
Emil,
step at that.
go ahead.
I think that it's really a difference maker because it ties the two, as I talked about earlier, it ties the two modalities together really, really well, and it ties a lot of the learning objectives that you have on each modality together into one experience. And again, it brings us much closer to what you would expect in the real world. I think we touched upon this, but you would also expect that you could be able to both talk to the patient, but also touch the patient and do physical maneuvers, of course. So I think that is that's something that will definitely impact the mixed reality in order to something that enables us to bring in real objects. Right now, it's more about tracking and creating this digital twin inside, tracking the real world objects. But it will become more fluid. It seems like we've gone from QR codes to EMF trackers in a short time. So we're really investigating how to bring this these two worlds together.
Thanks. Then we have a question from Max. Could you discuss how much of the data and processes reside on the cloud versus on the device?
I think as much as possible in the cloud. I think, of course, you have to, let's say it's a tetherless solution. Then, of course, right now the solution is either to have the data in the headset, but if you want the data to react live and then give feedback to the actual simulation live. So if there's something you're not doing, it has to react back to the simulation you're doing. It has to be cloud connected, of course. So the better this connection becomes, the more we want to put into the cloud. Right now, the VR is run on the headset. On the MR side, it needs a workstation on the side. But definitely, all data pushed to the cloud because it also it's not only informs what we can then feed to the user, it also informs the instructor if there's one at the other end who can then react live. So definitely as much as possible.
And then a follow-up from Max. So when considering the medical training use case, do you envision asynchronous collaboration to happen in VR, where people in different time zones and locations are able to view previously enacted simulations and participate in them?
Yeah, I think we already talked about this. Of course, one thing is that you record something and you can then re-enter the same simulation. We could have the instructor replay it, what happened, and then you can go through the whole simulation in the simulation, like seeing a ghost performance or something. But at the same time, we also see that instead of having to train with the people from your university or school in the same time zone, you can actually expand and then enter the simulation as a profession. Let's say a doctor and an anesthesia doctor or nurse enters in the same simulation. They don't have to be from the same school or state or whatever. They can be from all over. So that's again the digital benefits.
And then we have a question from Janice. So great job. The simulation looks so promising. What role do sonic representations and sound design play in the simulation design?
I guess that's
you want
also.
To, Emil, take this?
Yeah, of course I do. It's a big part. I would say it's a big part for both. I guess you're talking to the whole sound design. So of course, sound is both enables presence, enables the storytelling. It would be talking directly to a patient using AI, conversational AI piece. It's also a big part of the learning if you go with something like auscultation. That's actually an audio piece right there that you really have to get the sound in play to be able to learn that. So I guess I don't know if I'm answering the question, but that's what I'm understanding from this.
Then we have a question from Peter. Great insights. Question, will it be advancements in content/value delivered that move the XR health sector forward, or will higher hardware adaptation need to come first? And what about home/consumer grade medical devices? And when do you think we will reach a milestone of 1/10 of hospitals or medical facilities using XR in one way or another across Europe?
I think that's a really good question. I think we do see, can I say, barriers for implementation is that people simply don't know enough about MR and VR. We also see that once they try out a headset, they start seeing the real value of this. So of course we have a tall task of showing people the value of this technology without them having a headset of their own. So I'm guessing it's kind of a race between us creating enough value and people to implement the technology, and then on the other hand, VR and XR being sort of a household strategy. So I think at the moment we see more facilities, if they want to implement this, I think they tend to lean more about towards having an on-site facility that then has the headsets and whatnot. But then for the future, I see this going more to people's homes once this is implemented more like a household technology. So I think they are sort of simultaneously. I don't know what comes first, but
But what we can add, I think, and also what Greg has mentioned a little bit before in the past, I think with COVID-19 we might just be seeing the acceleration of the adoption in multiple contexts. So it could be both in professional but also in home use, and I think that acceleration will probably drive this kind of the industry forward in all fronts. And I was just curious what Greg is seeing as well on his side.
Yeah, I was going to add, obviously we don't necessarily touch the hospitals as much, but on the education side, I think, you mentioned labs versus home use, and we're seeing kind of a combination of those, in that you might have a high-end lab that has, better equipment and resolution and whatnot, and then you have, Oculus devices at home that students study from. And so, universities that we're talking to that really see places for all those components. I mean, much like in the simulation world, you're probably not having healthcare students with mannequins at home, but that doesn't mean they can't learn from the simulation they experienced with a real mannequin while they're not in that facility. So I think, yeah, in education, there's kind of a spectrum of things that are coming.
I think also to touch, there was a mention of the milestone of 1 out of 10 hospitals. And I think we also see that different hospitals have different groups have different sort of entry levels for implementation of tech. So it could be that a major hospital or a major school implements this, and they are like the guiding star for other facilities. So that might also be a way in for people to sort of get the results back, implemented in a bigger facility that is tech ready, get some results back, and their impact start showing, and then other would follow, I think.
That's actually one of the nice things about VR, I think, too, is there's buying the tech and then there's figuring out how to use it. And the latter is much harder. But because you can have, kind of like you said, the guiding stars, if they've got things figured out and running a good training program with VR, then, all I have to do is buy a headset and join them online, and they can help me a lot. And so there's a little more opportunity for collaboration there than there is with maybe physical devices where you have to be in person with each other.
Then there's a question from James that nicely follows up this discussion. So how do you see scaling the development/creation of courseware for educators, currently most educators develop their own content. Thus, we need to make it easier to create content in XR.
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely a need that we see out there. And the need, I think we see that because every school tends to be different, and every interpretation of the curriculum has its slight differences. So we definitely also want to focus on not just the content itself for creating whatever it could be, 3D content, but also the enabling platform in order to do this content in the school itself. So we are just providing a platform to a technology that should be implemented. A good question though.
Yeah, on our side, I think one of the somewhat surprise things that we're excited about is, we've had the ability to create content around anatomy for years on your laptop or other devices, and so a lot of universities have created lessons and guides and whatnot for our software. Almost all of those work very well in VR without change, because we have that same ability to access that content within our VR system. And in fact, most of the places that are using VR right now, if they're going to develop a lesson for it, they actually develop it on their laptop and build out the views they want, and then they go use it in VR. And so I think that helps a lot with the scale. And it also means that at least institutions that have already started down that path, they're just adding a technology. They're not having to redo a curriculum.
And then a follow-up into this from Christopher. So are there specific pedagogies and approaches to learning and assessment that are baked into the platform, or is it more of a blank canvas for content creators and course designers? Greg, do you want to follow this up?
Yeah, our product specifically has a lot of content built in for different levels of anatomy education, from undergraduate up through medical school. And then you can, of course, add your own too, and some clinical imaging and other pieces. So we provide you with something to start, and then a lot of people over time start adapting it and kind of adding in their own.
In our side, I think Emil, maybe Emil can talk a little bit more about this. So we see that there is definitely we see that there is no solution that fits all. So we do see different approaches to different markets. But so we have to take it in that way. I don't know if Emil has more content about this, but I think what's also important to to mention here is that we are really trying at this moment to figure out how to do this. So therefore, we are learning as we are building and learning and building. And I think Greg is also in the same space as us.
Yeah, I think that what Andre is saying also is that when we go to virtual simulation space, instructors there are asking for one thing. We'll go to a physical simulation, instructors there are asking for another thing. And well, that's what we are seeing MR as the luxury of, just bridging the whole thing. But definitely they have different focus, and they are of course built in strengths and weaknesses. But it also depends on who you ask and what they want.
There's so many questions that I think we haven't really coped to clear those out. So I think there's more questions now than in the beginning of the session, but I think it's just great. So next up, we have a question from Marcel. So what do you think are the benefits of virtual training with XR technology regarding the debriefing, error analysis, and self-reflection? Do you see a benefit in using XR technology for debriefings?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's has more to do with the digital side of it and the flexibility of, let's say, remote learning. So we definitely see a more one-to-one reflection. So let's say that we record the simulation, and you can go in specifically to jump back into the simulation and then see what you did wrong, what you did right, and you can actually watch yourself, not just clicks on a screen when I did what, but actually movement, and see where you paid attention and what you looked at, and how long you spent talking to a patient, or how little you spent talking to a patient. So it's much deeper, because you have so many data points, you have movements as well. It's a much deeper debrief. And then because you have the digital overlay, you can have a remote session, or you can have a one-to-one session with whoever, a fellow student, or it could be an instructor at the other end. So I have so many ways into this. It could be a screen, it could be somebody jumping in with you. There's so many ways to address this this debriefing session.
Thanks. And then I think we have still time for one question, and I'll pick the one from Shreya. So VR enables us to train more and more medical students, even remotely. But how do you balance the fine line between real training with real equipments and virtual training in VR? Can we trust the learning of a doctor only through VR to perform procedures on real patients?
Yeah, I would say that speaks more to the definition of the learning objectives and what plays better in VR. So of course, if you only play isolated and alone in VR, you would train critical thinking, and you train processes. If you open that VR space up to have like a multiplayer setup, you can train more soft skills like communication, and also communication between the team members, and also with the patient, of course. But then, of course, that is the big lag in VR. That's the big request in VR that we see. We need to get the haptics as well, and of course, it's only a matter of I guess technology about how close we can get to real patients. So I'm guessing that we are inching closer by the day. So I don't know. Maybe in the future, real patients can be simulated to look exactly like real patients. But right now we have this gap between virtual and haptics that we want to merge together.
And I don't know if I can add here, but I think this question leads a little bit to simulation in general, right? So just screen-based versus virtual reality. And right now, of course, we are in this phase of learning and discovering, but right now we see that engagement is slightly higher. So we do see some advantages of doing virtual reality. And therefore we believe in this, and we're investing towards that direction.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
The one thing I would add to that is, I think the industry that everybody points to that's taken the most advantage of simulation is flight industry, of course. But unless I'm wrong, I'm pretty confident that you don't put a pilot in the plane with passengers today without with solely virtual training. And so from that standpoint, yeah, I'm not sure that virtual will ever be the thing that you want your surgeon training on exclusively before doing a surgery on you. But at the same time, I mean, if we can make that training, save time and much more efficient in the interim, I think everybody's better off.
Yeah, and I think also it touches upon the gap between learning, studying, and then the clinical experience. So let's say that there's a big gap, and there's a big jump. What we hear from nurses typically, so there's a big jump from what you learn in school to actually going and performing your skills on a real person. So I'm also thinking that it's not a matter of replacing the time you spend in school. It's a matter of making that school time better off, so you actually get a much closer experience to real life in your school years or in your education. So the gap between learning and real life practice is smaller. So I think it's more about that than it is about replacing or completely sort of doing without real patients.
That actually relates really well to what we see educationally in the dissection lab. So dissection time with the cadaver is very expensive time. The lab's expensive. There's not time in the curriculum for it. And we find institutions telling us that what they see virtual is that it's a great way to optimize that time, because if a student can come in more prepared, then that 30 minutes they have in dissection lab can be much more efficient. They can learn a lot more. And so likewise on the healthcare side, time with patients is expensive. And so if you can bring a better prepared student into that environment, they can get a much better use out of the time. So yeah, I completely agree.
We see the same thing, definitely.
All right. Hey, thank you for the answers. I think we're out of our time now. We managed to answer half of the questions, but no worries. We'll compile those together and answer those later on to you and through email. In case this was interesting and you'd like to get started with your own training program, we have an exclusive webinar offer for you today. So all orders coming in from this audience will be added a complimentary pack of hygiene face cushions on top of each device. This will be valid till April 23rd. So in case you're interested, just reach me out. But to wrap this up, I'd really like to thank all of you for joining, and also a huge thanks for all of our hosts today. So thank you, Andre and Emil from Laerdal, and thank you, Greg from Touch of Life Technologies. In case there's any further questions to any of one of us, just feel free to reach us out through email.
Let me just take this time also to thank Greg and Varjo team for this great webinar. Thank you so much for setting up this for us.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I'd like to add to that too. Thank you guys. It's great to be with everybody.
Thank you. It's been our pleasure. So let's wrap this session now. Have a nice evening in Europe and have a good rest of the day then in the US. Thank you.